Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming back. My name is Joanna and my passion is to help you get you through and past your limitations. These are going to be your messages for September. For those of you who are a regular for my channel, you'll notice I did not upload any August videos, hence why these videos are quite a bit longer. There was a lot of information that I channeled through. So if you can't watch it all at once, maybe break it into pieces. If you need to just get moving into the videos, I'll put a stamp down below so that you don't have to listen to the record to this part. But I want to say a few things. First and foremost, I want to say thank you. Thank you for being part of my channel. Thank you for being part of my journey. Thank you for always inspiring me and encouraging me to be the best at what I do. And you'll notice my work is changing. It has been changing for a while, but it's more apparent than any time before that the way I work is shifting and changing. So consequently, over the next few months, you will notice that the way my videos are coming out are a little bit different, or the way the messages are coming out in my videos are a little bit different. There seems to be a greater emphasis on healing, so there will be some energetic healing that will come through. I will talk about that more a little bit later on a different video. But more than anything, there seems to be a bit of a shift in terms of how I receive messages and also what types of messages want to come through me. So if you have watched my videos for a while, you may see a bit of a change. I feel to me, it's incredible. The change is always good. Change is not always easy. But nonetheless, I feel the way things are going to progress going forward is the messages will be maybe even much more meaningful, even though I find that they're meaningful anyways, and many of you find my messages meaningful. I feel it's going to be even more meaningful. There's going to be a lot more that I will be channeling through to you. Speaking of channeling, I have noticed more and more that I am beginning to use less and less visuals, as in cards, and much more channeling. So you will notice in some of the videos that I have cards, but I barely talk about the cards. I show them here and there, but most of the messages are channeled. I feel that's eventually how my messages will come through. They will probably be mostly channeled with maybe some visuals, some tools, but long time ago Spirit told me that eventually my work is going to consist of channeling information and not really reading cards. So you'll see that coming through more and more as time goes on. And is there anything else I wanted to say? Yes, the 6-month messages, which are on Vimeo from July until the end of this year, there's a link down there below for you. And more than anything, if this doesn't make sense to you because it is general, then listen to it down the road, or even end of September or even October. I often mention that these messages flow way beyond a certain month. So I wouldn't be surprised if the messages you hear in September cover September, October, and November, even towards the end of the year. So keep that in mind. Also, some messages may not make sense to you at all because they are general, and I can only cover so many scenarios in a general situation. With that said, if anything resonates with you, or if you feel pulled towards having more of a personal session with me, that information is down below, and I trust you know how to find me. And again, I want to thank you for being part of my channel. Without you, I wouldn't do this. My gratitude goes out to you, and I love hearing your comments. I love reading your comments, and yeah, I hope you enjoy these videos and all the other videos that follow. And with that said, let's move on into each individual sign. Hello, beautiful Taurians. These are going to be your messages for the next 6 weeks or so, or from whenever you hear it until about the end of September or thereabouts, unless I'm being advised by Spirit otherwise. So let's start your messages. When I had a bit of a hard time, to be honest with you, looking at all this information here. At first, it felt like I couldn't pieces it all together, but the more I felt into it, the more I realized that there's indicators here that are all about you regaining your strength, you regaining your strength of your strength, you regaining your stability, you regaining your sense of purpose, you regaining your inner light, you regaining your passion, you regaining stability, whatever it is that makes you feel solid, that you foundationally are strong and solid. It feels like over the next few weeks or few months, this will be the new beginning for you. In other words, you're shifting and changing to the point where your own identity about you, or your own awareness about you, begins to shift so much that some people will say that they don't recognize you. So I am channeling this right now, and I'm having a bit of a hard time because I've got all the cards here, but it feels like it's coming from somewhere. So this is also an indication that I'm receiving information very differently. And the reason why it's happening live in front of you is because I know that some of you are experiencing the same thing. So if you're a channeler, if you're a healer, if you are, connected to source, or whatever you want to call it, you might start noticing that information flows through you very, very differently, or differently than before. Particularly if you are an intuitive, whether intuitive healer, intuitive reader, intuitive therapist, whatever that is, you will notice information flows to you differently. The other thing that I'm feeling is that when the information flows, it just lands. In other words, you don't seem to question it as much. And many of you know that I'm also a Taurus, so I'm watching myself talking about this, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm talking about me. So this is a good news for me to hear, because as I've said before, I have had challenges in the past with confidence, and I still do in many respects. So to hear this, that messages are coming and they're not being questioned as much, to me that says there is a greater sense of peace, or peace of mind is certainly much more present, and that allows us to experience receiving information without trying to figure it all out, or without the need to try to make sense of it right away. So particularly if you're a healer, you might start noticing that as well. Now I'm going back and I'm going, well, if they're receiving information, but information doesn't make sense, and if they're in front of a client, well, how are they supposed to make this make sense to the client? And what is it that I'm getting in return? Sometimes, and this happens in my sessions, sometimes information is provided from spirit that won't necessarily make sense to the client, and it may not make sense to me at the time when I'm saying it. And I've often asked spirit, why are we giving them information that doesn't make sense to them? And the answer is always the same: because it plants seeds. So sometimes you will receive information intuitively and you will not know where to stick it or what to do with it. Chances are, if you just kind of leave it there and don't discount it right away, there will be a time at some point in the future where you will go, I understand what this message means. So this is, those of you who are meant to hear it, you will understand it right away. And those of you who are scratching your heads, well, maybe this message is not for you. But generally speaking, if you're listening to me, and if you're listening to this channel, you are at least moderately in tune or intuitive. That's what I'm being asked to say. Even if you don't know it, but chances are quite high that most of you who are watching this are actually quite intuitive. I seem to be understanding lately that for whatever reason, I'm shifting more and I'm attracting either healers who are on the brink of expressing their healing art, people who have been wanting to do healing or are interested in healing. Those are the type of individuals that I seem to attract right now. So I am assuming without a doubt that you are one of those individuals. So hooray, I say to that. Which brings me to my next point. When I was meditating on our energy, I heard strength in numbers. And I went back and I asked, okay, well, I understand what this means. Strength in numbers means where there's more people, there's more, I get it. But where am I supposed to plug it into? And the message I got very clear is that it was just to leave it there. So this is a statement that came through, and the statement is, or the phrase is, strength in numbers. And although it may not make sense to you at the time when you hear it, it certainly doesn't make sense to me right now. Chances are, within the next 2 to 3 months, you will be able to understand what this phrase means personally to you. And I'm trying really hard not to get my mind too engaged, but I would like to provide some sort of a frame of reference, a reference point. For example, perfect example is change of consciousness. The more people individually shift their consciousness, the more our consciousness as a whole begins to shift. So the shift of all of us creates a tremendous shift of consciousness. So that would be an example of strength in numbers. So that's a pretty obvious example. I think I'm going to leave it at that, and whatever it's supposed to mean to you at some point, it'll make sense. The number 7 also comes up. To me, it's a very, right now, this is a healing number. So this is message that I just, strength in numbers connects to people who identify themselves as healers. Again, healers want to be interested in healing, current healers. This is a message that will more likely than not correspond with you. I'm also getting a physical sensation here. I'm picking up somebody's shoulder pain. So for those of you who are experiencing shoulder pain, and it's not really pain, it's more like it's tension. It's tension that produces kind of a dull sensation. It's not a sharp pain. I feel like I want to stretch it. There will be some of you who will begin to feel this as I'm talking to you right now, so don't freak out. But for others of you, it is an indication that you're holding a lot of tension. So most people hold their tension in shoulders or in their heads. Some hold it in the stomach, which is where I hold mine. So if you're experiencing this, make sure you take adequate breaks. So you might be working too long, you might be working long hours, you may be pulling, all-nighters because you have something to do. Obviously, if there is something that needs to be done, something needs to be done, but make sure you take good care of yourself. So that's a message for those of you who are experiencing any body aches. As a matter of fact, I'm going to expand on that. If you have body aches and pains, and if it's been bugging you for a while, and it doesn't seem to get any better, then maybe this would be a good time for you to have it checked out. And this message is important for at least one person. I am being told, or I'm being advised. So if you're having any aches or pains that are unexplainable and they're not going away after a few weeks, God forbid, few months, then chances are it's nothing, but it would be a good idea to at least have it checked out to make sure, so it doesn't bug you. Because if you don't know, then, who needs that? Who needs that thought in their heads, right? So that's for some of you. Is there anything else I want to say about the number 7? No, okay. I'm going to move on. The other thing that I saw was a very strong mind. So when I tuned into Taurians, the feeling I got was strong-mindedness. Now, being a Taurus myself, I have been accused of having a very strong mind. Maybe so. So chances are you have been as well, and chances are you are very strong-minded. However, what I feel is that though you may be strong-minded and strong-willed, and that is how most people see you, chances are you wouldn't have categorized yourself that way. So for those of you who don't necessarily feel strong-minded, for those of you who doubt, for those of you who who don't see themselves as others see you, then I feel the strong mind is, the message is, if you have been feeling weak in your mind, the current shifts you have been experiencing will allow you to feel that no longer. And the word doubt comes up. So if you have been doubting, particularly if you're a healer, if you have been doubting, like I have experienced with doubt a lot, And if you are intuitively getting messages but you're doubting, or you have been doubting, chances are quite high that between now and October, you will see quite a bit of difference in the way you perceive information, number one, but also how you deal with it. So if I said that there is a lot less criticizing going on, that would probably be a very accurate statement. So if you are someone who is highly critical of themselves, chances are you are going to ease off a little bit. And the strong mind to me represents getting back in the saddle and getting back into being an authority figure. Now, you may already be in an authority position, but you may not feel authoritative. That's quite common. Is it common? Well, let's just say it's not abnormal. And particularly because the King of Wands is what's looking at me. There's a lot of wands in here, which to me is all around spirit, passion, career, could be love, fire. You guys understand fire. And so for some of you who read cards, this may actually represent someone who is around you, who would fit the description of King of Wands. It doesn't have to be a male. But for me personally, this card represents an aspect of you, an aspect of us. And when I look at this message and at this card and I ask, who are you? And what I hear him say to me, I am who you wish to be. And when I look at this, I'm going, okay, who do I wish to be? What comes to me is I wish to feel empowered. So if you doubt a lot and if you criticize yourself a lot, chances are you are not very empowered. Doesn't matter what you try to tell yourself. So this is a beautiful message that basically says, over the next several weeks and months, you seem to be gaining, or shall I say regaining, your inner stability or your inner strength, which will allow you to gain greater control over your mind. And it's either our mind controls us or we control the mind. Which one is better? Well, that depends what you look at or how you look at it. But chances are, if your mind controls you, then you are, well, not in control, right? So I love seeing this. Very different message than I would get from a King of Wands, I believe, in terms of the traditional meaning. But this is, to me, total empowerment. Do not let the fact that this is a representation of a male sway you. It doesn't mean that you're going to all of a sudden become very masculine if you're a female. This is general message, so it can apply to anyone. But to me, it represents strength. And then again, I'm hearing strength in numbers. So the strength in numbers is going to mean something to you. I have a feeling that it is somehow community connected, community based. Perhaps you will regain this strength by being part of something that's really important to you, and that includes many other people or many other outside identities as part of a whole. There's something about strength in numbers that is going to make sense to you personally on some level. Let's go through some of the cards, even though I feel like I am just going to kind of channel this information. Let's start with this. The card of commitment in reverse came up. So generally, when I see this card, to me, it represents there is an ending of a commitment. There is a dissolution of a commitment. However, and that may be the case for some of you, but that is not what I was picking up. What came to me more than anything, that we are ending a certain relationship we have with ourselves. So we all have relationships with ourselves. I talk about it often. And the way you relate to yourself is generally how you allow the world to relate to you, or how you relate to the world. Let's put it that way. So for example, if you are someone who's highly critical of yourself, if you're someone who constantly doubts, then your relationship with yourself is one of distrust, right? Or maybe distrust is too strong of a word, but it's one of not trusting yourself. If that is the case, then you will find very often that you, in your personal life, either are in situations where you are put in a position and you don't trust yourself, so you waver a lot, or you have difficulty with trusting others. Point is, the more you trust, the more trust you develop within yourself, the more trust you will have in the world towards anything in life. Does that mean that you're not going to have any doubts ever? No, it doesn't mean that. But it means that for the most part, you'll feel much more settled. Why? Because when we trust, we are much more relaxed. When we're more relaxed, we're able to open up to receiving. And you know, I can go on and on, but I think you guys know where this is going. So to me, this is a fantastic omen. It's an end of a relationship you've had with yourself. That is what I'm getting from this. Let's move on with the cards. The Star and the Four of Wands, to me, represents transformation in terms of what you define as stability. Those two cards on their own, I don't believe those are the meanings, but again, I'm channeling this. It's not a traditional tarot reading, so I'm just going to go with what I'm getting. There's been some transformation around what you define stability is and what you deem as stable. I guess that's the same thing. And the stability is relative to the way you feel about yourself. And I feel that there has been a lot of transformative energies that you have been going through that has allowed you to shift your concept of you or your perception of you in terms of value. And that in itself allows you to feel more solid, solid within. So that would be your stability. That makes perfect sense to me, considering that this is what we're after. Okay, this is a person who is in control, in charge, empowered, strong, not bossy necessarily, but in control. This makes perfect sense to me. Is this what I want to say here on that? Yes. Is there something else that's coming up with this? I don't know why I want to say this, but what I want to say is this. When you tell yourself a lie, it eventually becomes your truth. So be careful what lies you tell yourself. Now that's really interesting. Because I don't feel Spirit is talking about, you lying to a friend that you can't go for coffee because you've got better plans or you just don't want to. It's not that. It's when you tell yourself things that are untrue about you, and then you end up believing in them. And obviously, whatever you believe in is what you will create. So if you are someone who is highly critical of yourself, notice where that criticism or self-criticism comes from. Does it come from the fact that you believe you are not good enough? Well, if that's the case, then you are telling yourself a lie, because if you look at your life, you will have thousands of examples where life has shown you that, in fact, you are very good at very many things. You may not be perfect at every one thing because you're not supposed to. But the idea of not being good enough, it's this label that we keep on reminding ourselves, and we keep on telling ourselves, even though sometimes we move past it, it's just so familiar, we just keep on doing the same thing over and over again. So the message about be careful what lie you tell yourself, it's about being very mindful of your mind, being very mindful of what you think. And that's where the control comes in. Your mind either controls you or you control the mind. You decide. Either way, you'll have an experience. It just depends what experience you're after. So I have a feeling that many of us are coming from having been controlled by your mind a lot, whether it's through an anxiety, whether it's through a lot of fears, whether it's through whatever. And through shifts and transformations, you are beginning to regain your inner stability And that, of course, will help implement trust, or will help build your trust. And as a result, your relationship with you begins to change. And here's again the, commitment in reverse. So I see this as a beautiful progression of coming from one end of a spectrum and to moving into another end of a spectrum. For many of you, this is about revisiting your identity. What do I mean by this? When you revisit your identity, you begin to ask yourself some pretty important questions. Questions such as, who am I? Versus, who do I choose to be? Questions such as, what is important to me? Versus, what it is that I should or need do. Those are the questions that often define what we do in life. And it is important that you begin to ask yourself those questions now. And I'm going, where are we going with this? Like, why is now so important? Because it's important to know what it is that you want, right? But it's also important that, because being conscious of what you are after allows you to keeps you on track. Why am I saying all this? There will be moments when you will forget who you are. You will have moments when you will waver. You will have moments where you will look back at your life, you won't recognize yourself, and you're going to say to yourself, who am I? It's almost like having a bit of a blackout when you're realizing you don't know who you are. It's almost like an identity crisis. That's really interesting. So during those moments when we waver and we go, have I lost my mind? And I know I'm talking to some of you who are not going to know exactly what I mean. Otherwise, this wouldn't have come out. And I feel it's for healers a lot. A lot of you are healers. Anyway, moving back on track. Where was I with this? As you begin to lose the concept of yourself, you will begin to realize more and more that you are not who you thought you were. In other words, there will be moments over the next few months where you will not recognize yourself. You will have moments of awareness when you will not know who you are. When you have those moments and you waver, that's when it's important for you to remember what it is that's important to you, okay? Because at the end of the day, once you know what's important to you, wherever you are in your moment of whatever, as long as you know what your intention is, you can always get back on track, all right? It's interesting why I'm saying this. It's just the way it's flowing is very different, but I'm going to trust this message is meant for someone, so I'm going to leave it there, all right? I'm going to move on to the next card, which kind of summarizes everything that I have said. New consciousness, and 5 and 4 is 9, which is all about letting go. New consciousness is all, well, it's just as the name suggests. You are shifting your awareness. And with each shift of awareness, and apparently it's a complicated process. Why is it complicated? I guess I don't know, energetically it's complicated. But every time we shift, or every time our energy shifts, our entire world shifts as a result eventually. So it is impossible to have shifted inside and not have that shift affect your outside. It is virtually impossible. So because of this new awareness, because of this shift in consciousness, many of you will experience letting go of things that no longer serve you, things that are no longer resonating in your vibration or with your vibration. Things are that no longer useful, or things that weigh you down will be eliminated from your path and blah, and to bring something in, to substitute, not substitute, what's the word I'm looking for? You take something away and then something comes in to replace. Thank you. Another opportunities, other people, other situations, other doors will open to you. So don't be surprised if over the next several months and several years, but let's stick with several months, major shifts in your thinking will occur. And as a result of that, you will be presented with many amazing and beautiful ideas and opportunities. And I want to say, for some of you, these are things you would have never thought were possible for you. And again, I'm speaking a lot to healers, healer wannabes, people who want to be healers. Healer, if you consider yourself a healer or want to be a healer, this message is for you. So just jot a note for yourself somewhere that says, in moments of crisis, identity crisis, what I need to remember is what is important to me, and then you decide what that is to you. The reason why this is so important is because we are all experiencing fundamental changes. Majority of people I speak with are going through changes. That's just fact of life. But I feel like the changes we're going through right now are amplified somehow. The energy is on a fast speed, on a fast highway. Everything is amplified and everything seems to be sped up. So it only makes sense that the regular type of changes that we experience all the time will be almost like condensed in a shorter period of time. And that may feel like it's a lot. So that means changes in jobs, changes in relationship status, changes in career choices, changes in living arrangements, changes in where your abundance comes from, source of abundance, changes in identity, changes in the way you look at, and actually physically changes in prescription for some of you. So there's a lot of magnificent changes and opportunities going on or coming up. I think that's how I want to say it. I think it's important for me to mention this card. It's the Five of Swords in reverse. So upright, it's being very guarded. Five of Swords, very guarded, not very trusting. This is moving past it. This card actually, I believe, one of the messages of the card is ready for change. So, and it is supported by this beautiful elephant. And I don't know about you, but elephant is one of my favorite animals. Not only are they strong, they're very resilient. They're not solitary. Strength in numbers. Here we go again. Fire here. Passion. Third eye here on the red dot on the third eye. It's illuminated. There's a lot of safety and security with this. A lot of stability. I mean, think of an elephant. It's very strong. It's very solid. So I feel you are moving from, what would I say? From being someone who is more or less insecure in some way to someone who owns their own value and as a result opens up like a flower. And from that space, when you give, generally you give unconditionally, which means you do something because you love it, not because you're trying to get something back. The coming back to you happens automatically, but that's not necessarily what you focus on. You begin to trust people just because, unless they give you reason not to. You begin to pay less attention to the things that used to give you headaches in the past, but now it's just a waste of your time and waste of your energy. You begin to look at things from the positive perspective first, even in situations where that's really, really, really hard. In other words, and financially, you begin to look at your finances very differently. You begin to look at it as not as something to be feared of not having, but as something that is there to support you in whatever way. And incidentally, if your relationship with finances is not very good, then that relationship is likely to change as well. Everything is energy. Always remember that. Everything is energy. Money just happens to be something we use as an exchange in a physical 3D world, but it's all energy. It's all energy. So if you think of it in that way, it's the law of reciprocity. I think that's what the word is. When you fundamentally understand the principle of how energy works, it's given, receive. It's just a natural cycle. It's the yin and yang. Everything is striving to be in balance. Okay, so if we give too often and not receive enough, then we become lopsided. If we take too much but don't give, we become lopsided that way. This is all about coming back to balance, coming back to more of a balanced state. And this is definitely a person who feels in balance. So this was fantastic to me, absolutely fantastic. Is there anything that I want to... Yes, I want to talk about this little turtle. This little guy, well, for starters, there's a lot of green and red on him or her. To me, this is significance of healing around safety and security. So, of course, red is your first chakra. It's all about survivability. Incidentally, we have a lot of red here with the cards. There's a lot of healing going on in that department. Okay, my eyes are also being drawn to these here, and it's obviously not a spine, and it's just a coloring. But it's I want to say these represent chakras, and there's a lot of feminine energy going through these chakras. What do I mean by this? There is healing going on for many of you. Some of you are literally getting healing around your spine or your back. Generally, though, there's a lot of healing taking place. And some of you intuitively know this. I'm seeing this. I can't explain. I'm just going to tell it like it is. So there's a lot of healing around stability. There's a lot of healing around survivability, around structure. Remember, you're shifting how you define safety and security and stability. You're shifting that. Okay, there's a lot of red here. The turtle always has its home on its back, which means doesn't matter where he or she is, always feels at home. This is a metaphor for inner stability. This is a gal or a gal that feels pretty darn solid, pretty darn stable. Very good place to be. But this message also says slow and steady, slow and steady. So if you are feeling rushed, or if you are trying to rush through this process, always know that you can't rush through a process. And it's almost like process has its own intelligence. There are certain ways, there are certain things we got to go through, and there's no making it faster. It's just the way it is. So if you are in a hurry, or if you feel in a rush, or if you feel you're too old, chances are you might want to look at what's the underlying belief system that is making you say that, and also follow up with looking at the relationship you have with yourself as you're making that statement, because those types of statements generally come from an insufficient feeling of safety. Okay, so there's a lot of healing here around stability, around inner conflict, around feeling safe, insecure in your own skin, feeling like at home. The whale is very symbolic of our depth. So depth of emotions. I don't feel that one can feel truly aligned and in harmony or in balance without having at least some level of their deep emotional body, their deep emotional wounds, their deep emotional connections. I don't feel one is possible without the other. I could be wrong, but that's what my gut tells me. So there's a lot of healing going on here, subconsciously, deeply. And I don't feel this is something that is just happening out of the blue. I mean, it could be for some of you, but for majority of you, this is something that you've been working on, and for some of you for 10 and 20 years. So there's these shifts of perceptions don't usually happen overnight. They're progress. They're work in progress. I was being asked to say one more thing. Self-sacrifice is another area where there is healing is taking place. If you feel like you've been on a hook whether because it's financially, whether emotionally, whether something, and you've sacrificed something of yourself as a result of that. I feel there's going to be quite a bit of a release around that. I'm trying to tune into it differently and see if I can, any sadness around unfulfilled dreams. This is a message for some of you. Any sadness around unfulfilled dreams, I feel you will be able to let that go. So that to me signifies letting things go, leaving things in the past, which is where they belong. And when that happens, we don't drag that energy forward. So we are much less likely to not only repeat the same steps over and over again, but we are at the same time freeing ourselves for something new and for something different. So this is interesting message coming from this card. The idea of self-sacrifice, it's a very noble concept and it's beautiful, but the message here is, if you're sacrificing a lot and you're not getting anything in return, maybe ask yourself, what is this self-sacrifice giving you? Now, I just said you're not getting anything in return, right? So that would be an oxymoron. But oftentimes we are not consciously aware of what it is that we are getting from something because we don't think of it that way. We don't interpret it that way. So if you are stuck somewhere where you are sacrificing your happiness, your identity, your whatever, ask yourself, what is this giving you in return? And the typical response would be nothing. Well, the unfortunate part is that if it was nothing, you wouldn't be part of this energetic exchange. So there's got to be something. And it's generally something you're not thinking about. So some of the example could be, well, because at least it feels safe. It gives you stability. At least you know what to expect. At least you're not going to be alone. At least, all the things we tell ourselves, at least it gives you that. Okay? So this is going to be a message for some of you, not for all of you, for some of you. And the other thing I want to say is this. Being a martyr doesn't pay off in the end. So I think that's a pretty standard, statement, I guess, but it's supposed to mean something to some of you, all right? So if you are sacrificing a lot, and I'm not talking, taking care of an elderly parent because there's nobody else. I'm not talking about that. That's obvious. I'm talking about other things. Sacrificing your own happiness in staying in a marriage that clearly isn't working because you're too afraid to leave. That's an example, okay? Sacrificing your happiness and your integrity by staying in a work environment that is so against what you believe, but you're afraid you're not going to find something else. So rather than just trying to find something else because it's a lot of hassle, you're remaining there. So, you always get something in return. Ask yourself if this is the price you're willing to pay. And if the answer is yes, by all means continue. But if the answer is no, and at least be honest with yourself. Because if you can't be honest with yourself, then that creates a bit of problems. But the moment we begin to be honest with ourselves, it's like Spirit sees it as us proclaiming our freedom. When we admit to ourselves, this is my truth, it's like we're opening a window where fresh air can get in. You're no longer in self-denial. When that happens, we free up the energy to go and create whatever our next steps are. So you are freeing an energy to create by admitting to yourself what the truth, essentially. That's why knowing your truth and sticking with your truth is so important, because energetically speaking, it allows us to create. When we hold back, it's like we hold back the energy. I'm hoping this is going to make sense how I'm explaining it, but that's kind of how it's coming through. So I hope, most of you will understand this. Is there anything else? No, I think it's time for me to wrap it up. All right, we're at 39 minutes. So those are the messages for the next several weeks. Thank you so much for liking, for sharing, for subscribing. If this makes no sense to you at the beginning, listen to it down the road. Many of you say that that's the case and it makes perfect sense a few weeks down the road. Of course, this is also general, so it may not apply to anyone, but chances are if you listen to this a year from now, or if you listen to this from, 6 months from now, if you're listening to it, chances are there's something in it that you'll find will resonate with you, even if it's just an idea that can be applied to your life, because that's how energy flows, that's how messages flow. But anyway, thank you so much for giving me your time, essentially, and your energy. Without you, I wouldn't do this. So for private sessions, of course, if you would like to have a private session with me, that information is down below. I would be very happy, and I will be honored. And with that said, enjoy the rest of your summer, and I will see you soon. Take care. Bye.